Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel, MD physician. Today we'll be discussing on one of the another interesting topic we call aortic aneurysm. Meaning is very simple. It is an aneurysmal dilatation of a part of aorta. We call that as an aortic aneurysm. We'll be discussing under these common headings. So what is aneurysm? Aneurysm is a localized dilatation more than 50% then adjacent normal portion of the same artery. There is another term called ectasia. When aortic dilatation or arterial dilatation is less than 50% above the normal, that is termed as ectasia. And there is another term called as arteriomegaly. It is a diffuse enlargement involving several arterial segments where there is an increase in the diameter which is greater than 50% above the normal. So arteriomegaly is more than 50% dilatation over the normal diameter. But if it is 100% dilatation, then we call that as aneurysmal dilatation. Now, classification of aneurysm will depend upon many factors. One, we call is a true aneurysm, where all the three layers of vessel wall, that is intima, media, and adventitia, all the three layers are involved. While in a false aneurysm, or we call pseudo aneurysm, it is collection of blood between media and adventitia. That is called as a false aneurysm. Depending upon the shape, it is called secular, fusiform, or Berry aneurysms. Berry aneurysm are small round aneurysm which are commonly seen in a cerebrovascular tree, mainly in circle of Willis. While secular aneurysm, it is a portion of a artery which is being secular in shape. While fusiform, it is a elongated portion which is being dilated, which is called fusiform aneurysm. And there is another term called as pedunculated, where there is a small stalk and then there is an aneurysmal dilatation of a part of an artery. Depending upon the anatomy, it can be in the ascending part of aorta, arch, descending part, abdominal, may be present in cerebral blood vessel, which we call as a Berry aneurysm, renal artery involvement, or maybe even on a peripheral artery like popliteal artery, iliacs, etc. So depending upon the anatomical localization, you can label that also. That is based on localization or anatomical localization. And on etiological ground, the most common cause we call congenital and acquired. And among acquired, we call secondary to atherosclerosis or syphilis. These two comes topmost on the list. So you can divide into congenital and acquired. There is also another term called as a cylindrical, pedunculated, where there is a little stalk. You can see here all the three layers are involved. So this is a true aneurysm, and it is only one part of the artery. That's why it is called secular. And when both the sides, entire portion of the arterial wall, complete circle, then it is called true aneurysm, and then the word utilized is cylindrical or fusiform. Cylindrical or fusiform. This is secular, only one side. This is entire diameter or entire circumference is involved. That will be fusiform or cylindrical. Elongated portion cylindrical, and small portion fusiform. And here you can see that the blood is collected between the arterial wall and adventitia, extravascular connective tissue. Then you call that as a pseudoaneurysm or false aneurysm. You can see again here, this is pseudoaneurysm formation. This is true. Only one portion secular, entire diameter fusiform. And when you get a stalk, this will be secular, and if this gets elongated, then we call pedunculated. Etiology wise, atherosclerotic, syphilitic. If in infective endocarditis, the bacterial emboli produces a damage to the arterial wall and then ends up in a aneurysm, then it is called mycotic aneurysm. Berry aneurysm are usually congenital, and when aneurysm ruptures, we call rupture of aneurysm, and if aneurysm dissects out, then we call dissecting aneurysm. These are some of the terms which are being utilized. So you can have a mycotic aneurysm, dissection, Berry aneurysm, secular, cylindrical, depending upon the shapes, etc., and depending upon the etiology, the most common atherosclerosis, syphilis, and mycotic aneurysms. So shape-wise, secular, fusiform, cylindrical, Berry aneurysms. There is one another word called as a varicose variety, where it is a tortuous dilatation of a vessel. And there is another word called as a racemose, where there is a mass of intercommunicating small arteries and veins. That is called racemose. Depending upon the portion, if it is only thoracic portion, it is called thoracic. If it is extending from thorax into abdominal portion, then it is called thoracoabdominal aneurysm. And depending upon how much portion, this is the entire thoracic portion with a small portion of abdominal, it is called type 1. Here, entire thoracic aorta and abdominal aorta, then it is called type 2. Where abdominal aorta portion is more than thoracic aorta, it is called type 3. And when it is purely abdominal, it is called type 4. So mainly thoracic 1, mainly abdominal 4, thoracic more than abdominal type 2, abdominal more than thoracic type 3. Accordingly, it is labeled. And if you classify according to thoracic portion of aorta, a very small portion close to subclavian we call as A, close to diaphragm we call B, and if it is right from subclavian till diaphragm, it is called C. Location wise, renal artery involvement, abdominal aorta involvement, cranial artery involvement we call cerebral or Berry aneurysms, and thoracic aorta involvement we call thoracic aortic aneurysms. Frequency wise, abdominal aortic aneurysms are more common than any other variety. You can see it is almost 65%. So abdominal aorta is more common, second common is thoracic aorta, then comes rarely abdominal plus iliacs, then thoracoabdominal variety and isolated iliac variety. If you look in the peripheral variety, popliteal and femoral are the most common, accounting for nearly 90 and 70%. Popliteal is 70%, femoral is 90%, and you can see that other rare groups like carotid, subclavian, cerebral, splenic, etc. So popliteal and femoral comes topmost on the list as far as peripheral artery aneurysm is concerned. This is Berry aneurysm, very common, and this Berry aneurysm, chances of ruptures are much more common. So this is thoracic portion, so this is thoracic aneurysm, this is abdominal aneurysm, this will be A and this will be D. We have shown you here. Or this will be type 1, This will be type 4. So this will be type 1, where there is a mainly thoracic portion. Abdominal portion is normal. This is pure abdominal, thoracic portion is normal. You can have aortic root portion involved, aortic root aneurysm. Ascending aorta involved, ascending aortic aneurysm. Descending aorta involved, descending. And when arch is involved, arch of aorta aneurysm. And when abdominal portion, we call it the abdominal aorta aneurysm. In abdominal related to renal, it is called juxtarenal when it is within 1 centimeter of renal artery. When it is above the renal, we call suprarenal, and if it is below the renal artery, we call infrarenal. We already mentioned regarding a brain aneurysm, that is a Barry aneurysm, and chances of ruptures are very, very common. They are usually secular variety, or occasionally they can be fusiform variety. Depending upon the dissection, they are divided into type 1, type 2, type 3 according to DBK classification, Stanford wise A and B groups, or you can call proximal and distal. If the proximal portion is involved, we call proximal variety. If distal portion is involved, we call distal variety. Proximal portion is also called as type A, distal variety is called type B. And in proximal variety, you divide into two, we call as type 1 and type 2, while distal variety is usually type 3. So DBK classification wise, this is dissecting aneurysm going towards this side, we call type 1, and ascending aorta portion involved type 2. And when the dissection is going distally, it is type 3. And according to Stanford classification, it is called as a B. And this proximal dissection is called as type A. And in proximal, it is further divided by DBK. That is, if ascending aorta and descending both are involved, we call as 1. If only ascending aortic portion is involved, we call as type 2. Type 2. And both combined together in Stanford is called as A. That is proximal dissection, this is distal dissection. The commonest causes of aneurysm is atherosclerosis, which comes topmost on the list. Second common is infection, which affects the arterial wall. Most common is syphilis. Nowadays the syphilis is not seen, we call as tertiary stage of syphilis. But more common than that is because of mycotic aneurysm, which is secondary due to infective emboli from infective endocarditis, which involves the arterial wall, and mainly it will involve the arterial wall which is having a blood supply. So that is called mycotic aneurysm. You can come across in a congenital disorders like Marfan syndrome and Ehlers-Danlos syndromes, which are connective tissue disorders. Secondary to penetrating injury or blunt trauma, you can come across in a person with severe hypertension, uncontrolled hypertension can also produce aneurysmal dilatation of aorta. In an old age person, male are more prone to, smokers, chronic smokers are also more prone to, and if there is a strong family history. Following a graft aneurysm can be common, those are called graft aneurysm, and at the junction of anastomosis, post arteriotomy, you can have an aneurysmal dilatation. If it is following a surgery, it is called post arteriotomy or graft aneurysm. But secondary due to operative trauma can also produce a damage to arterial wall and can end up with aneurysm. Based on Etiology, congenital, we already told you, tuberous sclerosis, Turner syndrome, Menkes syndromes, connective tissue disorders like Marfan, Ehlers-Danlos, cystic medial necrosis, or Benny aneurysm. These are all congenital variety. While in inflammatory, Takayasu, Behçet's, Kawasaki, periarteritis nodosa, giant cell arteritis, SLE, and periarterial, as in case of pancreatitis. Infection, mycotic aneurysm, which can be bacterial or fungal. Sorry, this should be G. Fungal or syphilitic. Syphilitic is very uncommon. And most common atherosclerosis and severely uncontrolled hypertension. Because it are all the different etiology you can divide into congenital and acquired. Yes, it can be post dissection, idiopathic, cystic medial necrosis, or secondary due to trauma, or post stenotic thoracic outlet syndrome, coarctation. Pseudoaneurysm can occur in case of a trauma or anastomotic disruptions. Rare condition like pregnancy or inflammatory abdominal aortic conditions. Abdominal aortic aneurysms are much more common, and the most common cause is smoking, male, severe uncontrolled hypertension, advanced age, or surgical repair which is being done over aorta, and then secondary to that post operative you can develop aneurysms. And most common cause is atherosclerosis. In thoracic aortic aneurysm, the most common cause is Marfan syndromes, previous aortic injury, a traumatic injury, maybe a blunt injury, or maybe penetrating injury. And in abdominal aorta, atherosclerosis, smoking, hypertension, vasculitis, cocaine, or genetic factor. While Barry aneurysm, purely genetic. Some of the risk factors: strong family history, Marfan and Ehlers-Danlos, atherosclerotic, 90% in particularly in case of abdominal aortic aneurysms, where smoking, hyperlipidemia, diabetes, obesity, etc. are the main risk factors. Male are more prone to female, and as far as age is concerned, old age, most common risk factors. So smoking, COPD, hypertension, male gender, older age, high BMI, bicuspid aortic valve, family history, coarctation of aorta, etc. becomes the prime factors or risk factors. This is Marfan syndrome. This is Ehlers-Danlos. Now going through the pathophysiology, atherosclerotic plaque will produce an intimal surface damage, can also degenerate the media and decrease the elasticity of the media layer, weakening, dilatation of aorta, pressure effects, clot formation, thrombus formation, and from that thrombus, thromboembolism, and that dilated portion or aneurysmal portion can produce pressure effect on the surrounding structures like soft structures, nerves, bones, etc. Even bone can be eroded, and you can come across an aneurysmal portion projecting out on the surface where it will be producing pulsatile swelling. And in the aneurysmal part, because of the turbulent flow, the flow becomes sluggish. There will be thrombus formation, clot formation, thrombus formation, and from that thrombus you can get a thromboembolism. That aneurysmal portion can get fibrous, calcified, or sometimes you can get dissections, and if it thins out, it can rupture also. So rupture and dissection will be quite common. That will be partly in case of an atherosclerotic aneurysm more common. Now, secondary to diminished blood flow, whichever artery is arising from the aneurysmal part, there will be decreased blood flow. So that particular artery will produce low volume pulse, diminished blood pressure. So any artery which is arising from aneurysmal part or after the aneurysm, in that artery there will be diminished blood flow, secondary to diminished blood flow, low pulse volume, low blood pressure, and person can have claudication also. So weakening, degeneration of the vessel wall, aneurysm formation, expansion, and then later on can rupture. So this is typical atherosclerotic ulcer and thinning, and then you can have a rupture. This is false aneurysm. False aneurysm. So here this does not contain intima and media. So this is a false aneurysm. So aneurysm can become thinner, bulged out, tear can take place. So we call dissection, and it can rupture also. This is dissection. So intima gets separated from media, and then blood will enter and it will dissect out. And secondary to dissection, you can get an ischemic changes. It can involve lower limbs if it is distal dissection. Kidney can be involved, bowel can be involved because of involvement of the mesenteric arteries. If it dissects proximal, then you can have an acute MI, aortic regurgitation, and ischemia because of involvement of subclavians. Clinical features wise, a small aneurysm may be absolutely asymptomatic. If it is adequate enough, big enough, and particularly if it is cylindrical or fusiform, the pressure effect on all nearby structures like trachea, esophagus, bones, nerves, etc. If it is close to trachea, say in arch of aorta, it can produce cough, hemoptysis, collapse, or atelectasis. Compressing on esophagus, dysphagia, bone erosion, and then it can project out, and it can compress nerve, particularly if it is an arch of aorta aneurysm. Very commonly it can compress left recurrent laryngeal nerve, producing hoarseness of voice, or also called recurrent laryngeal nerve palsy, and person can have a hoarseness of voice. These are common secondary due to pressure effect in case of arch of aorta aneurysms. Distal to aneurysmal part, low pulse volume, low blood pressure, and person can even get claudications. Aneurysmal portion, because of sluggish blood flow, thrombus formation, and from that you can get the thromboembolism, which will go distally. Thinning out, it can rupture, bleeding can occur, and person will develop hypotension, and sometimes if not treated early, even mortality like death. We already mentioned if it is ascending variety of dissection, it dissects towards the root of aorta, where it can involve coronary artery producing acute MI. It can produce disruption of aortic valve producing AR, acute aortic regurgitation, which can end up into acute left ventricular failure. And as it involves subclavians, there will be upper limb ischemia, and secondary to due to acute MI or acute left ventricular failure, person can even have a death. And if it is distal, it will involve lower limb, abdominal viscera, and can produce ischemia and damage to those organs. So maybe asymptomatic, you may feel a lump which will be pulsatile lump. In a symptomatic, pain will be due to erosion of vertebra. There may be infection. There may be distension or expansion of aneurysmal part, and as far as complication is concerned, rupture, thrombosis, thromboembolism, etc. So right from asymptomatic, we have mentioned everything. Those are mentioned here, which can take place, and depending upon which portion is damaged, accordingly you will get symptoms and signs. You can go through at leisure time, that is superior vena cava obstruction because of the pressure effects. It can be acute or chronic. You can get pericardial tamponade. Murmur can be present because of acute AR, and person can go into acute LVF. Pressure on trachea can produce dyspnea, stridor, wheeze, and collapse atelectasis. On esophagus, dysphagia. And because of effect on trachea, hemoptysis. On esophagus, hematemesis. Erosion of the bone, back pain. Dissection. Distally can produce paraplegia, paraparesis, distal embolic phenomena, ecchymosis, petechia, and this can be lethal and person can die also. So these are all this is big secondary to abdominal aortic aneurysms. So symptoms are sudden severe pain, nausea, vomiting, constipation, problems in urination, cold clammy, sweaty skin, light headache, rapid heart rate, shock stage, secondary due to dissection, or maybe because of rupture. The aneurysm which is not ruptured or dissected, on a deep palpation you will get a lump which is pulsatile, usually above the umbilicus, mainly in the midline and little towards left side, because aorta is little towards left side. You will be getting pulsatile swelling, and there may be a tenderness also over that aneurysmal part. So it can be asymptomatic or as a pulsatile abdominal mass. Very rarely you hear a bruit, and when it ruptures, sudden abdominal pain, pulsatile mass, and hypotension we call triad. So if you get acute pain in abdomen, sudden hypotension, and pulsatile mass, it is more in favor of rupture of abdominal aortic aneurysms. Unruptured, we have already told you, may be symptomatic, may be asymptomatic, but following a rupture, acute pain in abdomen, flanks, back, genital, chest, depending upon which portion is involved, you can get syncopes, vomiting, that is pain, hypotension, and pulsatile mass. So pain, hypotension, and pulsatile mass is a classical triad, and this is what is being shown. This is increased mortality and almost 25%. See, survival with major complication is only 25%, but this is 50% die at home, 50% die outside the hospital, that is at home, and 50% in hospital. So survival rate is very, very less. If detected early and if treated early, survival will be there. So these are the symptom signs of abdominal aortic aneurysm, which is very common. We call triad: pain, hypotension, and pulsatile swelling. Those three. You can have even a Gray Turner signs, Q-lens sign will be seen because of rupture. So red flag sign, chronic low back pain, osteoporotic fractures, cauda equina syndromes. Look for abdominal aortic aneurysms. So as early as possible you detect, you will prevent complications. And main dangerous complication is death. So gradual unfolding or information is over of time, means you try to investigate as early as possible, suspect and examine. This is thoracic, you can see a swelling, and if this is pulsatile, thoracic aortic aneurysms, where there will be difference in the pulse in the two upper extremities. Blood pressure will be different. You will have a pain and pressure symptoms depending upon the site and size of the aneurysm. Constant pain because of erosion of the surrounding structures. Intermittent and neuralgic pain, dyspnea, pressure on the trachea, pressure on the esophagus, abnormal pulsatile swelling, hoarseness of voice, complete aphonia if both recurrent laryngeal nerve is affected, dysphagia, superficial veins on the chest because of the compression of the venous system, cyanosis, distended neck vein, edema, decreased venous drainage, ipsilateral dilatation of pupil because of even a sympathetic nerves can be involved, multiple symptoms. And because of, we have already told you, because of ascending dissection, acute AR ending up with a acute left ventricular failure. It can also end up with acute MI, and simultaneously there will be low pulse volume in lower limb, ischemia. There will be also upper limb ischemia, and upper limb pulse will be absent, and in descending lower limb ischemia and gangrene in lower limb. So depending upon the type of dissection, in proximal dissection you will have upper limb aortic valve and coronary artery involved, more common, while distal dissection you will have more of abdominal vessels and lower limb blood circulation being affected. This is typical of atherosclerotic aneurysm, which can rupture or can get occluded or thromboembolism and can present as an pulsatile abdominal mass. In cerebral aneurysm, which are most common, is Barry aneurysms, which are congenital, which can rupture, and once it ruptures, it will be producing intracranial hemorrhage or subarachnoid hemorrhage, which will have severe headache, nausea, vomiting, seizures, altered level of consciousness, right from confusion till coma. You can have a meningeal sign secondary because of subarachnoid hemorrhage or intracranial hemorrhage, and you will have symptom signs of raised intracranial pressure. As far as investigation is concerned, you have to suspect first, and the most simple investigation which will confirm your diagnosis is ultrasound, which can be transthoracic or transesophageal for ruling out thoracic aneurysms. For abdominal aneurysm, abdominal ultrasound, chest X-ray and abdominal plain X-ray may show calcification, in which you can suspect and then confirm by ultrasound or by echocardiography. Transesophageal and transthoracic will be useful in thoracic or in a case of an arch aortic aneurysms. CT scan with angio will be helpful to find out the size, site, shape of aneurysms, which arteries are involved, etc. You can also go for MRI angio, which will be giving you little better idea than CT angio. You can have a plain angiography, which is going to give you only regarding a damage to the blood vessels and blockage of the vessels. But MRI with angio will give you site, size, exact location, what are the number of arteries involved, etc. EKG is not of much help, but if EKG is showing an acute MI, it is a dangerous sign. Colored Doppler, or what we call as a Doppler duplex, can also be helpful to find out the dissection, etc. So history is very important, followed by physical examination, then comes X-ray, ECG, ultrasound, CT or MRI angio, and then echocardiography. Echocardiography will be useful in thoracic and arch of aorta aneurysm in those conditions. We call ascending aorta, arch and thoracic portion. While ultrasound will be helpful in abdominal aortic aneurysm. CT and MRI angio will be helpful to find out the site size as well as number of artery involves and other complications. You can see the sensitivity of angio, and if you combine angio with MRI, the sensitivity will increase. Transthoracic will be helpful mainly in case of transthoracic or transesophageal in thoracic aorta or arch of aorta or ascending aorta. So depending upon that, you can go for. Biomarkers to indicate thrombosis, D-dimer is very helpful. Inflammatory biomarkers, cytokines, C-reactive protein may be helpful. Collagen tissue, turnover, elastin peptides, endothelin, hepatocyte growth factor, homocysteine, etc. And genetic marker like ribonucleic acids, etc. can be utilized. This is abdominal ultrasound, this is angiography, this is plain X-ray showing you the calcification in the aorta, and this is MRI. You can combine with angio. In a chest X-ray, you can see an abnormal dilatation, loss of aortic contour, dilated part, aortic calcification. You can see the shift of trachea, etc. And you can have a deviation of trachea and left hemothorax. All those findings you can see in this particular. You can see a big dilatation, a shadow, which is aneurysmal part. This is also aneurysmal part. You can see a calcification. So that you can identify sometime. It is also called as egg cell pattern of calcification. Here also you can see that there is a calcification. Here also. Management is mainly from prevention of a complication we call open surgery or open surgical repair. So you open up, dissect, clamp the two ends, remove the aneurysmal part, replace it by graft, and then that graft can be covered by the part of aortic tissue. So that will be there. And if it is not a very big size, you can go for endovascular aneurysmal repair. So it is endovascular stent grafting, it is called. We have got some photographs, we'll show you that. By and large, open surgical repair is for a longer term of success, which gives you a very good success rate. Usually in a younger individual with a large portion of aorta which is involved. While endovascular, you will have a short stay in a hospital, blood loss will be less, ICU utilization will be reduced, it reduces the morbidity and mortality. You can also do in an older patient, and you require less long-term follow-up and may need secondary procedure for a end leaks, may require. You can see this is an open surgery. This portion is removed and it is replaced by artificial material we call as a graft material, which is mainly made up of Dacron. And this is endovascular. You put a catheter and you replace it in that particular by what we call as a stent grafting. So this is vascular procedure, or we call endovascular procedures. You have got multiple different types of stents which are available, right from single stent to different types of stents. So you can go for those different, and complications management will depend upon the symptoms, size, complications, which artery, etc. What is the amount of, usually in open surgery, clipping, wrapping, coiling and endovascular graft procedures are most commonly being done. This is clipping part, this is wrapping part. You can wrap around the aneurysm and then proceed, and you can use a coil also. This is a big aneurysm, this is replaced by arterial graft, and then you cover that graft by a portion of the aneurysmal wall, and you can utilize this portion for cover. You can see that it is suture. So aortic wall is utilized to cover the synthetic graft. So it gives you an additional strength. This is, you can see, a long thoracic aneurysm is replaced by a graft. And here abdominal as well as ascending, both portions are replaced by a graft. This is endovascular. You put a catheter, you open up the stent, so stent will open up, so stent will replace this, and you can replace another portion also like this. So there are multiple different types of stents which are being available, and you can utilize that. Suppose if the person is developing an acute limb ischemia secondary due to arterial thromboembolism, in secondary due to aneurysm, you can go for endovascular or surgical repair as early as possible. Usually you can, another procedure is thromboembolectomy, and very rarely you require amputation. This will be only if there is a delay in the treatment, but by and large if you detect them early, you can go for thromboembolectomy, or you can go for endovascular surgical repair after thromboembolectomy. These are the different things which you can do. Also you can go for thrombolysis. Complication, we already discussed. Two most common complication is dissection, and second is thromboembolism. Very rarely you get a fistula formation, local compression, mass effects, etc. And local compression very commonly on trachea, esophagus, nerves, vertebra, etc. So because of rupture you can have hemorrhage, acute MI, stroke, shock stage, AKI, lower limb ischemia, aortic regurgitation, etc. I end my lecture here. No doubt this is not a very common disease, but once in a while if you see any pulsatile swelling, do think it over, and you can utilize this particular portion. See you in your next lecture.